Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today in partnership with Sawchuck. My name's Neil Perry and I'm Managing Editor here at Procurement magazine. Now today's session is called Smart AI for Procurement, what every leader should know. So let's explore that subject a little bit first. It's impossible to have any procurement tech conversation really now without bringing in the question of AI. There are so many tools and solutions out there, so many great ideas, but how can leaders make the right decisions? Now, I know we could talk for hours about this. We're going to try and get this into 40 minutes. But there's an argument that AI in procurement is simply not a one-size-fits-all scenario. We should all explore maybe a mix of solutions. There's so many opinions out there. Well, by the end of this session, this is what we are looking to have covered off. We want to cut through the hype and look for the indicators that you're getting the most out of your use of AI, which is obviously critical. How to make maximum advantage of AI opportunities, and as I said, make sure we're really using AI effectively, the maximum bang for your buck if you so wish. Now, lots to do, not much time to do it in, but thankfully I've got some real expertise on hand to take us through all of this. First of all, I'm joined by Olivier Berrouiguet, President and CEO at Sawchuck, and also Chris Sawchuck, Principal and Global Procurement Advisory Practice Leader at the Hackett Group. Chris, Olivier, great to speak to you both again. How are we?
Doing real well. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. I'm doing perfect and very, very happy to be there with you, Chris, and with Neil.
Yeah, great to see you again. As I said, we have a huge amount to get through, so let's get stuck into this. And well, for me, this is the way to start things. Gen AI, really at the peak of inflated expectations in the Gartner hype cycle. So how do people navigate the trough of disillusion? And what a lovely expression that is, at speed and use AI most effectively. Olivier, I'll start with you on this. How do we get through this point of the hype cycle?
Well, that's difficult. I mean, obviously, this technology, AI, has been there since a long time, and now there is some kind of acceleration, a visible tip point of the iceberg, we call it, because AI has been there, or machine learning, or any complex data management solution has been there since a long time. But now, thanks to the revolution, the perceived revolution of Gen AI, with ChatGPT, it's been like an explosion of everybody's trying to use this and believing and expecting is going to solve a lot of things. So it's complex because we see more and more than only one technology cannot solve everything, and we see more and more that those technology are going to be there forever because they bring a lot of value anyway.
Chris?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. We've been through a interesting period of time. You made a comment that we're at the tip of the Gartner hype cycle right now. And typically what you have in that hype cycle is you have broad awareness of generative AI. And, I would argue that this started to occur in the middle of last year. And so you went through a period of time where there was a lot of time that people had to become much more aware of what generative AI was, digest that. And in many ways, if you went back to the spring of 2024, earlier this year, I think we got to a point where there's this broad awareness of what it was. And now we're in this period of time where organizations are sort of stepping back and really asking themselves in terms of, how do I apply this? And I'm speaking more specifically around supply management and procurement. There are other areas of the business that I would argue are much further ahead in product development, R&D, et cetera, where they are applying generative AI, I would say, more aggressively in those organizations. In the space that Olivier and I are in, there's a little bit of a lag, though there are organizations out there that are pretty far advanced in, what is happening with generative AI. But you have to sort of step back and really start to figure out of all of this noise, out of all of this hype that's out there, really develop a deliberate plan in terms of how I will apply it within my environment. And that all starts with the objectives that you have. The rules that we played and used in business haven't changed. We have objectives. We have to still formulate visions for our organization. It's just today we have different ways of solving some of those that in tools and technologies than we had before. We've gone through this before. I would argue that what we're going through right now potentially will have a bigger transformational impact on what we're doing today. But the same rules still apply in terms of having objectives, a vision, and being very diligent in terms of how I do something. And this is one of the, I know we're going to probably talk a little bit about what are some of the mistakes, but you don't want to build a bunch of toys within your environment. You want to build things that have defined business impact, are helping you to further along what you're trying to achieve.
And that's exactly where I want to take things next, Chris, as you were saying about some of the mistakes, because we don't want to be too glass half empty, but a mistake, one person's mistakes is another person's learning opportunity for both of you. And Chris, I'll start with you. Some of the biggest mistakes you've seen from your perspective in the market when it comes to implementing and using AI in this particular marketplace.
Well, it's hard to, really look at AI to look for those mistakes. And sometimes I look back into other periods of time. If we went back before 2020, we went through this whole period of digital transformation, sort of the elevation of, how do we, become more digital in terms of, how we actually deliver our services, what we do as a business, et cetera. And so, that period of time is a great one to reflect on, to say, what were some of the mistakes that we made then? And let's make sure we don't do that now. I think one of the big mistakes was, and I'll go back to the comment that I made, organizations building toy boxes. And I give you an example. There was this, leader of procurement in a particular organization that came in this new organization. And one of the things that you would look at this particular organization, it was in the the health sciences area. I won't say what industry because I don't want to divulge any companies, but what you would argue from the outside of all of us listening, say, wow, look at what this company is doing. They're doing X, they're doing this, they got this over here, and all of these things that they're doing. When this CPO joined the organization, from the outside, looked at all these toys that they had created, they weren't creating value that was needed for that organization. They were merely what I call toys. And so what we want to do is not create a bunch of experiments in our organization. What we have to be very deliberate about, and this is what I was just saying, is that whatever we build, it's actually allowing us to further what we're trying to achieve as an organization. Just because somebody else does something doesn't mean that it applies to your organization. Now, it's great to be informed by your peers, by others in the marketplace, to learn. You never want to stop that. But at the same time, make sure that whatever you're building helps to achieve an objective that you have. This, to me, is the period of time that we're having to go through right now. This is where the froth starts coming off of the hype cycle and off of the market. So we start to see more clearly what are those things that we have to go do, because our objective in terms of what we're trying to achieve as a business hasn't changed. It's just how we will actually get there will change a bit, but we still have to stay on that path.
Yeah, I love the analogy of the froth there. That's absolutely spot on. Olivier, I'll come to you next on that. Some of the biggest mistakes you've seen in the market?
Well, if I step back a bit, I'm going to talk about another sector, another industry that at least personally I've learned from. It was 10 years ago in the e-health software medical device industry that I was in. And I could see that a lot of companies, I was working a lot for pharmas, they were super excited by the Dr. Watson tool for big data manipulation, and getting value out of this, and they were all trying it, and there were a lot of expectations, and I think the tool was all right. And it's not a question about the tool, as Chris says. It's really about what do you want to do with it? What is the thing that you really want to achieve? And it's different from an organization to another. It's different whether you are in a specific therapeutic area to another, a different branch in the way you build molecules together. It was not a success. Maybe 20 or 30 big pharmas tried it out, and it was not as fast and as unbelievably successful as what expected. Why? Basically because the questions were not enough accurate. I mean, it's all about how acute the question, the issue you want a system, a solution, a tool, whatever it is, to solve for you. You need to be sharp, and even maybe sharper, despite the promise of Gen AI. Gen AI is helping you to talk your language, but it's not replacing your the good way to ask the question. And we see that because now there's a lot of training for asking the right, putting together the right prompt. So the mistake that we've seen, including ourselves sometimes, is like, whoa, we expect too much from a tool. You need to, as usual, get your thing prepared, which means, okay, why am I asking this? What do I really want to solve? Can I measure it? When do I want to see the impact? What is the end-to-end actions, events that I want to better manage, better control with this technology? You know, this kind of question that not super complex in itself, but deep. And if you think that the tool is going to solve these questions, that's the big mistake. The tool at the end is just a tool. There was one guy during ISM last spring in the US that said very, very well, you know, it's going to be an and technology, not a or technology. So that means that if it's an and technology, the good you know, way to work, which means, okay, are my data valuable, reliable? Are my questions asked the right way? You still have to do that work, and then you're going to benefit potentially from one AI, which could be Gen AI, or a mix of different AIs or other data manipulation tools.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting when you highlight that, because, you know, we have a perspective on this, that there are things that you can do that are more incremental in nature when it comes to generative AI in your environment. An example of that would be some of the productivity tools that are out there today. And, you know, many of us are familiar with ChatGPT. We're using it. Many of us have also utilized things like Microsoft Copilot. You know, my company, we got licenses to that about a month ago. So we're starting to use that to improve our productivity, summarize meetings, etc. But it's an incremental way to start to use these technologies, use AI in your environment that will improve. And when you think about the benefits of that, is we have to free up time, you know, over a longer period of time. You know, at Hackett, we did a study, it was last year, and we were trying to really understand, what do we believe the impact, and to Olivier's comment, it's not just about generative AI, but it's the collection of these intelligent automation technologies. You know, other types of technologies beyond generative AI, which has been around for a long time, really providing some of the advanced analytics, machine learning, you know, predictive capabilities, and continuing to be enhanced. But now the generative AI, conversational assistants that are intelligent, even looking at RPA from the past and making it a bit more intelligent, are all ways that we have to orchestrate all of these technologies in this environment. But there are very incremental things that we can go do to get started. And this goes back to, Neil, you're asking us in the beginning, you know, now that we are where we are, we see a lot of folks that are I'll say, dipping their toe in the water just to learn and become more comfortable. I think that's critical. The next level really is transformational. As you start to think about fundamental changes, transformation like we think and have thought of, we just now have different ways to achieve that transformation today with generative AI. And this is where we can take a much more deliberate and architected way as we think about how we want to transfer our organization. But there are things that are, I would say are breakthrough. And these are much more, there's a much more narrow set of these opportunities within our environment. And when you start thinking about breakthrough opportunities with generative AI, you start to have to consider, are there things I can do with this technology that are not just going to be me too? Many of the things that we talk about, everyone can do that. They can go to their solution providers. Today, the most prevalent example of using generative AI, is in contract lifecycle management. When you look at the breadth of the solution providers in that space, most of them have applied generative AI in their products today in many, many advantageous kinds of ways. And it's very interesting. You say, well, why is that? Why is that space? Because you have a lot of unstructured data. That's the contracts. And so this is one of those areas. We're going to start seeing that proliferate as well. But you would say if it's, if it's in these different types of tools, over time, most people have access to those types of tools. So the question becomes is there a way to take this technology and apply it that it gives me an advantage versus everybody else? Something that we do unique or something that we do faster than everybody else. You could argue that anything that you do over time is going to be copied, right? But can you do it well enough that you have some advantage for some period of time? And I think that's going to be really interesting to see what supply management in organizations can do and actually really harnessing generative AI to create something that they, not all of them can really pinpoint is how do they create a competitive differentiator and advantage for their organization.
I'm going to want to get on to having the right blend of different AI technologies with you in a second, Olivier. But just before we move on, there's one point I wanted to pick up with you, Chris, and put you on the spot for a second. You were saying about, toys. You've got this shiny new toy. How, as a leader, do you differentiate between an AI toy, which is maybe not that useful, or I guess the opposite? What would that be? An effective tool? What advice would you have of making sure you're picking the right technologies, and how do you spot the toy compared to the effective tool?
Yeah, and I'll go back to some of the things I was saying. If cost is one of your objectives as an organization, then what are we doing to drive cost out of the organization? And are the considerations around the tools that we have? If you look at, examples of tools such as, in generative AI, people use supplier discovery tools. They'll go out to the marketplace and you say, well, how does that impact cost? Well, if I can find alternatives out there, if I can discover new suppliers, using some of the techniques, that are available to you out there, then potentially I could look at alternatives, increase competition, and drive cost. Now, sometimes, the goal is speed, so, today, one of the ways that businesses are competing, I would say more prominently between each other, is the speed, the velocity that they have in the marketplace. So if the business needs to increase its cadence of doing things, then we in supply management have to enable that. And we have to figure out ways to speed what we do. Well, again, generative AI can help that, in terms of, speeding through. I was talking about contract lifecycle management. I mean, just reviewing contracts, developing new contracts using information from previous contracts, creating template libraries like many of these tools have to actually do that, using these tools to actually create a new contract based on the objectives that we have. There's a lot of different things to do that can speed the process as well. So those are areas. And again, first, You want to make sure whatever you're building is aligned to something that you're trying to achieve. And if the leader of the organization, the company said speed is most important, or cost is most important, or agility is most important, then the use cases that you're looking at should, you have to ask yourself, I'm building this. Does it help us to achieve the agility objective that we have as a company? And if so, how? And if it doesn't, why are we doing it?
Absolutely, that laser focus on that objective. I want to move on now quickly. Olivier, we were talking about the right blend of technologies, the right blend of AI tech. For you, how at Sign of Trade do you go about doing that? That's not an easy scenario to be in. How do you do that to try and make sure it adds value to clients?
Well, we try to be smart. It's difficult to be smart in this fast evolving situation, technology-wise. Even if on the business side, the situation is quite well known, nevertheless, over the last 5 years, the situation has also evolved, putting a lot more on the plate of CPOs and procurement organizations, and the world, the business is quite more difficult to anticipate and to control and to work with. So being smart means one size fits all in terms of technology never really work. You need to have different set of technologies comes together. I can remember 25 years ago, beginning of web industry, and you had people that said, oh, everything is going to be this standard or this standard. It was the same 10 years ago with the cloud. We say public cloud, oh no, it's going to be, and at the end of it, it was hybrid that is dominating, because that's nature. I mean, it's a rule that we see. So in order to prepare ourselves and be smart, first of all, we try to understand again and again, asking customers and checking how they work, what is really expected, needed on very pragmatic and concrete cases where you need faster action, less people working on a case, or broader set of information, or both. And these kind of situations are, we challenge them in order to design the way we have all of these action in our system, getting the right data at the right moment. Instead of AI or big data, I like to talk about smart data. You know, it means that you have been thinking about, what do I need this data for? When? Is it the data that is going to help me to be broader in the information I'm looking for? How accurate I need this information to be, etc., etc. And to do that, definitely the system as we have, which is a source to pay software platform of the market, has to be equipped like a turbo, like a site tool or set of tool you need, which we call data fabric, because we see that in the day of any procurement leader or people, there is very often a moment where the digital process is going to stop, and it's going to be, oh wow, I need this. Where do I find it? How accurate it is? How fast I'm going to be able to get this data, this file, this number, this whatever, and then I need to be able to find it quickly if I have a database or if it's on the web, and then I need to make something with this data. If it is obvious, I can make my own decision myself, but it is a bit more complex. I need a tool that could be a basic Excel or maybe something more elaborated to make a decision for the next step. And this kind of question, this kind of situation are going to be a lot more present in the companies, not only in procurement, everywhere, because of those tools enabling this kind of new situation that were not possible even 3 years before or 4 years before. So this is 4 years ago, sorry. So this is why when I say we tend to be smart, we try to understand each of the different processes, the best practices we have for SRM, P2P, S2C, contract management, and check what is the essential data you need at this step. Is AI, Gen AI solving your issue? Oh, not really. Maybe another one. Maybe it's more machine learning. Maybe it is more a mix of Gen AI and machine learning. And we work case by case, you know, to be able to demonstrate, okay, starting point without this technology and with this technology, how can we measure? how can we measure the gap, the impact for this customer and this customer? As Chris says, it's going to be a step-by-step or ongoing evolution, not revolution, evolution of those technology adopted step-by-step, success after success, and fail after fail. So to do that, you need a place where you can do that in a structured manner. This is what we call data fabric.
And that was something I wanted to dig into a little bit more about data fabrics. It's an expression I've heard you use before, and it might not have potentially landed with some people about what it actually means, how it can be implemented. Give me a bit more background on that expression, how it's valuable to people.
So that has been starting like 3-4 years ago. The big three, if I name them like that, I mean, Amazon, Google, Microsoft are working on this kind of solution. Data management has been kind of very, very an expert isolated tower for decades. The promise of data fabric is that, wow, it's going to step by step open up a bit because of the new technologies and the new connectivities that the new technology are, enabling. So that's the next frontier of how can you manage data. So the thing is if I think about what I need and expect from a data fabric is, all right, it's going to be easier, faster to get the right data. The right data means the data in a format that I can play with, which is not a data which is like 2 years old, rather recent and rather fresh in order to be meaningful for my organization. So it's all about access to data. How do I access to data in one place? It's a virtual place, of course, but in one place. Then when I have my data, what do I do with it? Do I have enough tools? Because very often I see that as a CEO, I'm asking my finance guy to make another Power BI because I need another understanding of this situation. Maybe I'm dreaming of some tool I could use myself in order to manipulate very simply some big crunch of data in an easier manner. This is something which is also in the data fabric promise, is a place where you can manipulate analytics around your different source of data in an easier manner, which is a demand from everybody. And then at the end of this is how, when I have gathered my right data, when I have my right analytical tool, which is no longer an expertise that is take a long time to access to and to get, what do I do with it? Do I inject that back to my management loop, or is a way to put together a very easy to understand set of information, such as data resume or data status that I can share with an executive or a stakeholder? So these three groups of promise are essential to data fabric as we speak.
Well, that makes sense.
I would just say, as Olivier has highlighted, and Neil, you asked the question, we've been talking about generative AI, and I think what Olivier is highlighting is an enabler. Generative AI, you could argue, it didn't occur until a couple of years ago. It was in the labs, probably 3 years ago. College kids were starting to use it, bringing home to their parents, like my son did to me, and say, where did you find this? How are you writing papers using a technology, Chat GPT? And then, really, permeating business, as you could argue, that's really started to occur in 2023. But sometimes the question is, well, if AI has been around a long time, why hasn't generative AI, and I'd say, well, there's different technologies, et cetera, but I would argue is that the data wasn't there, and generative AI needs data. And in many ways, we had to get all of our organization. You think about the technology transformation that we've been through for decades, and then more accelerated from 2015 as we went through the so-called digital transformation phase and transformation within our companies. The goal was to start taking a more digital first, perspective on transformation. But once we got it all in the technology, it was digitized. Now we could engage with it because the systems that we put in place were exhausting data. They were also ingesting data as well. So data became core. And I think today we're in an environment where people understand that. And so one of the core capabilities, and this is what Olivier was highlighting, has to be our management of a very valuable asset to our company is our data. And understanding that there are different characteristics of that data. And people use the term the 4 V's or the 5 V's or the 10 V's. There's different ways to characterize data. But one of those characteristics is the volume of data. If it's an asset, we have to continue to grow that asset. So just because we have access to some data today, we have to continue to build that. And that becomes a capability, a critical capability of our organizations. We have to get a variety of data, understanding that some of the data that we have will come out of the systems that we interact with. Some of it will be unstructured. I was talking about contracts, that are not necessarily structured in a way. Some of that data will be from sources within our companies. Sometimes that data is going to sit outside of our companies with our suppliers, with partners, et cetera, or just in the open market. So how do we continue to grow that over time? And that becomes a critical skill. But, one of the comments I also made earlier was around velocity. Just like food, data gets stale. And your ability to act on data quickly becomes critical, because what might have been a unique insight today may not be a unique insight, 30 days from now. So we have to, so the velocity by which we can act on it, ingest it when we find it into the system is very important. So there's a number of different things that we have to consider around data and how we manage that data to create ultimately value to enable all of these systems that we're talking, these technologies, generative AI, et cetera. And I'll just make one other comment. They are not the only enablers. And I'll just make it, and maybe this is going to be one of your questions coming up, but we're creating environments where we're going to have to, allow and create an environment where the human element is comfortable in this environment that's unfolding and will continue to unfold over the next 3+ years.
That's exactly where I wanted to take things next, Chris, and that is that environment. How can procurement professionals actively prepare themselves, that their teams, their organizations, to take the maximum advantage of AI? We hark back, as we've talked about the cloud and digital transformations before. I know when some cloud technology was coming in, when I was earlier in my career, there were some people who embraced it, thought this is the greatest idea. You have all this access to things, or you can share, and other people they just couldn't process it. It's like, well, this lives on my computer. How have they got it as well? You know what I mean? It's a step change. So let's do a bit of advice here about how procurement professionals can really prepare themselves, their teams, organizations to take maximum advantage of AI. Olivier, I'll start with you.
Well, I think that those professionals has to be given not only the right tools, as it was explained, is not enough, but the right culture, the right training, and the right understanding of how powerful those tools can be. Obviously, procurement leaders and procurement professionals now have to, well, it's been the case since, I think, ever, but it's now getting really acute. They need to do two things which are counterintuitive. They need to save money, or TCOs, and they need to save risk. I mean, if you think at the personal level, if you want to have something safe, normally it's going to be longer or more expensive. And the other way around. What they are asked is really to make faster, better decision, faster execution, in order to have safer and cheaper results, which is a big challenge. All these technologies and the access to data, and that data is absolutely gold. And as you said, Chris, what is valid this month is no longer valid next month. Well, yeah, you can see that in any business review situation. The executive team expect that your data are fresh, and the decision we can make out of these are based on recent and valuable data. So the future for these teams is going to be depending on how their organization are helping them to manipulate these data in a better, more efficient manner. How these organization help them to build step by step, or have a continuously evolving solution system that they can learn from, because it's new for everybody. I mean, a year ago, you could hear that Gen AI would solve, you know, 95% of the issues in the world. We know it's not the case now, and it demonstrates that it has to be evolving and quite flexible in the way it's going to be proposed as tools and solutions and processes to the procurement professionals. But no doubt that the world is going to be different in the future than it was from that perspective. The access and the manipulation of big flows of data is going to become more and more essential.
Yeah, and I think, building a little bit on, what you said, Olivier, is that, one of the things is we have to, as talent, because when you look at generative AI, there are enablers to doing that. We talked about data and how critical that is to allow generative AI to work, going forward, and what we have to do in terms of managing that asset within our organization. I would say the other critical asset, as we've just been highlighting, is talent, because it's not an environment where the generative AI will just take over. We're fundamentally creating a different environment within our organization. The study that we did in 2023 at Hackett, we looked at all of the functional areas that we study as an organization. That could be finance and IT and HR, but it included procurement and supply management. And one of the things that we did is, when we look at a function, we look at a set of processes, we look at a set of, sub-activities, within those processes, et cetera. And we looked at all of the various technologies that could be applied to these various processes and activities that we do as professionals in procurement and supply management. And we asked ourselves, if we look out over the next 5 to 7 years, what will be the impact of these technologies on these processes? And we estimated about 46% in procurement. And you could always say it's plus or minus something, but let's just say 50% of the work that is being done by procurement professionals today will be done and go away because technology will start to do that themselves. So with that, you can look at that and say, well, there's an opportunity that we freed up all of this capacity in our organizations, which is critical because organizations in the current environment aren't looking to hire a lot of folks. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on headcount today. In some cases, even reducing that headcount. So we have to find ways to become more productive. But when we initially put that out there, I think a lot of folks looked at that and say, wow, you're saying, you're going to cut heads by, 50% over the next, 5 to 7 years. That's not what we were saying. What we highlighted was that an opportunity was going to be provided, that we are going to free up 50% capacity to do other type of work. Then the question is, what is that other type of work that we as sourcing and procurement professionals will be engaging ourselves in outside of what we become very comfortable with in the past? And so with that other type of work, and we can go into lots of discussion on what that work is, but we have to look at it in a way that work fundamentally changes, in that we as professionals will need different skills. And so we look at that is that there is a set of skills that may not be as prevalent within our ranks as procurement professionals today around data, around technology. Now, we have that in different pockets, et cetera, but those skills will become more and more important on a go-forward basis. The ability to be comfortable in engaging in these very complex environments and understanding that we as a supply management organization will be less dependent on the processes that we execute and more dependent on the information and ultimately the intelligence that we create for the organization based on all of this data that we will have access to, and using tools like generative AI and AI to engage with it. And so we have to be very comfortable with that. At the same time, I do believe the softer skills will continue to be. Strategic skills will become more and more important, because if we're going to create an organization that's more intelligent, creating other types of value to create competitive differentiation, strategic skills become much more important. Broader business skills and understanding the broader business context and having acumen around that will become more important on a go-forward basis. So, many organizations have foundations of these, but this is going to have to permeate all of the individuals in supply management.
Absolutely. We are rapidly running out of time. So to close things today, let's go back to our title, Smart AI for Procurement. What should every leader know? So let's go back to that. So just in a minute or so for each of you, what do you feel every procurement leader should know now when it comes to the use of AI in procurement? What's your closing thoughts on that? Olivier, I'll start with you.
Well, as I said, first of all, I would say be curious. Maybe it's good time to invest a bit of your time understanding of what we talk about. And there's a lot of things everywhere on the internet, but also with the professional ask questions. Second, I mean, you need to be convinced that there is no other way. As in the graphic industry, if you were asking 20 years ago, will you go for a paintbrush? And now there's no option. It's obvious. I mean, the industry will move. And third, I would say, yeah, as much as possible, try to understand what is the mix between having the right information, the right data. Again, going back to a more kind of startup way of thinking and step by step redesigning some of the value cases that you have in mind. Rotating the cube, as I say, opening up to new technology that might be helping you to do some small step faster than you even think, and put a squad in your team from the beginning. This is what we do inside Synertrade in order to discover that, wow, we thought it was impossible, but it's possible with these new technologies, and we can move a lot faster. So that's would be my recommendation to procurement leaders.
Yeah, I like that expression of turning the cube. That's absolutely it, Chris. So yeah, I'll give you the final word of this just in a minute. What do you feel leaders should know?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and I'll build on what we've already said. I spent a lot of time talking about objectives, and yes, it's a new technology, et cetera. Be aligned. What we want to do is we want to build stuff that creates value for our organization. But at the same time, there's a term I use sometimes, and it's you don't know what you don't know. And there's a lot of things that we do as organizations as we plan. I mentioned that there's different levels of value that we can create through generative AI, and some of that is more incremental and productivity based. Some of it's transformational, and then there's the breakthrough. And to me, breakthrough is where we have to, test new things out. This is where we, have the opportunity to create competitive advantage. But the thing I think is important is that we have to look outside of supply management and procurement sometimes for those ideas. Why do I say that?
Yeah.
If we went back, a couple of years ago, and I remember somebody asking me in 2021 about trends, in 2030. When I gave them the trends of what was going to happen in 2030, this is only 3 years ago. Generative AI was not part of that. What I'm suggesting is that there are things that we know, and we try to, sort of foretell where we're headed. And a lot of organizations are looking at visions 3 years out, maybe even 10 years out. There's a lot of stuff that we just don't know that we don't know. And what we're going to find out about some of that stuff is we have to get outside of the walls of supply management. There are a lot of technologies, a lot of developments that are happening. So be curious, be open, look for things outside of where we are and see the possibilities, and ask yourself, might these things be able to be applied in supply management in the future? So I think it's going to be more and more important to stay abreast of the developments, because the pace by which things are changing now is tremendously fast. There's a different cadence around technology developments and business itself. And so it's going to be critical to stay abreast of those developments looking forward.
Absolutely. And what would be fascinating is if we actually have this conversation in 3 years' time and see how wrong we all got it. But anyway, we'll put that in our diaries, perhaps. Anyway, I'm afraid that is all we have time for. My thanks to Olivier at Synertrade and Chris from the Hackett Group. We'll speak soon again, no doubt. The recording of this webinar, of course, will be available shortly, so you can come back, watch any bits you may have missed or wanted to double click on, or share with anyone you may feel will find it useful. I'm sure there is. But for now, thanks again for watching, and bye for now.